Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another long form conversation with Mark Steves. Damn it, sorry, I'm not going to say. Let me redo that. I forgot not to say your last name. Sorry, man.
No, you don't. You don't have to. You don't have to redo it. Keep it.
Oh,
Now you have to redo it either way.
No, keep it. Keep it. It's
then we'll
fun.
keep it. Then perfect. We'll keep it from Alt Media United. I love it. I love the free flow of it. Today, welcome back to the Elemental Philosophorum. Today we will be covering a very, very interesting element. I think all three of us have different sources, research, and perspectives on this, which is the element called tungsten. So again, without further ado, Mark, brother, as we usually do in these episodes, the floor is yours to begin.
Thank you. Thank you for gathering with me here on another Elemental Philosophorum. Tungsten is the element of the day here, and I think it's very innocuous in the sense that everybody kind of assumes like, oh yeah, tungsten. I think I remember that from science class. It's inside of a light bulb, right? Well,
right.
It's interesting because its name actually comes from heavy stone. Tungsten is a Swedish or Norwegian word for heavy stone. And it actually only got that name sort of to clarify. It comes from wolframite, which is named, which is why it has a W as its symbol for wolfram.
Right.
And it got that name from a gentleman who was, and I have his name right here. I don't want to get it wrong, but I could not remember because it's a doozy of a name. So it was.
Talking about the Schleal guy?
No, well, there was a guy. There was a different guy who named it.
Oh, Fausto de Hiller. No, I know. Yeah, that's a weird name.
So he was a chemist, and he noticed.
I'll put his name typed out on the screen for the audience, because no one's gonna pronounce that right.
That'd be cool. So he named it because they were trying to make tin, and they noticed how the wolframite would just like devour the tin and just like spoil the whole batch. Right? They were trying to make alloys. We got into that on a previous episode. Who knows what they were trying to do? I think they were just trying to make tin back then. They didn't really have the use for it that we do now. Mm-hmm. But then, where I found the real interesting connection was this guy that you just named. He has the same birthday as me. That's weird. Not the same year, obviously, but same birthday, October 11th.
Interesting.
And then the guy who kind of brought tungsten into its actual application that we now remember it for, is conducting electricity sufficiently enough to glow and create light. It was a guy named Ebenezer Kinnersley, and he was in Philadelphia. Okay. Which, people listen to the My Family Think Some Crazy podcast know I talk about this quite a lot. Great Mystery Philadelphia. Philadelphia is on a bunch of different ley lines. It's an incredibly energetic place in many different good and very bad ways. So it's interesting that we see Philadelphia being, the innovator in this sort of science, because there's so much Promethean energy in the symbolism around Philadelphia itself.
Right.
So that could take like a whole other conversation. People should check out Ross Ben's work if they want to learn more about that. But I found that really interesting, that the guy who kind of put the idea in Benjamin Franklin's head that this would even be possible was a man named Ebenezer Kinnersley, and he was working with a more primitive type of battery that just wasn't holding a charge long enough. So he was really only able to make his electrodes glow this kind of like dull red light. But the idea was sparked like, oh, we can use something as a medium, run a electric current through it, and it'll glow, right? So this, led to many innovations and problems, and we eventually get to a guy named Edison, who is remembered for inventing the light bulb. Well, obviously, anybody who looks into his story knows that he was just a really great businessman, less than he was an inventor. Yeah. And he actually, had many, many different people working for him to figure out how they were going to create this light in a way to harness it. So tungsten was eventually found to be the best candidate for this. It's got the highest tensile strength and the highest melting point of any metal.
Yeah.
And it's also extremely heavy, which is why I'm sure you guys will add to this, why it's used in military armor and also in armor piercing bullets, but bullets isn't the best. Projectiles, it's used in armor piercing projectiles, even like these space spear weapons that they drop from space that are like super heavy. They're like tank busters.
Yep.
And it's seen now to be like a environmentally friendly alternative to uranium, because uranium and tungsten are equally heavy in the sense of heavy metals, not quite as heavy as tungsten, but it doesn't have that radioactive waste effect afterwards that tungsten, or that uranium has. So that's kind of the broad strokes of what I found, but what do you guys have to add to that?
Well, not to interrupt, to completely tangent, my neighbor just texted me, my cat is in the hallway. BRB. I have no idea.
I found some very interesting things pertaining to we see here according to Wikipedia. Again, this is just basic Wikipedia. Jack Parsons, rocket engineer. His full name was John Whiteside Parsons, was an American rocket engineer, chemist, and Thelemite occultist associated with the California Institute of Technology, Caltech. He was one of the principal founders of both the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Engineering Corporation. He invented the first rocket engine to use a castable composite rocket propellant and pioneered the advancement of both liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. Now, very few people know this, to my understanding at least, but Mr. Parsons, with Aleister Crowley, used to actually perform rituals within the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now, this ties back into tungsten because they allegedly, during some, not all, some of these rituals, they used certain metallurgies, such as tungsten, in order to, I don't know for what, but again, as part of these rituals. Now, I only say this not in a way of trying to pass judgment, but from a neutral perspective, the question becomes, okay, putting aside the very depraved things in which occurred there, what extent did tungsten play in any potential, ritual seance, ceremony, if you will? And that, interestingly enough, takes me to my next point, which is that if we take a look at I'll share this with I'll share this on the screen very quickly, but I do want to find maybe a more just a separate source, but this is according to the BibleFiles.com, September 2nd, 2021. Researchers in Russia find dozens of strange disc-shaped objects containing tungsten. If we do a quick DuckDuckGo search, and I think that's one of the great things about doing these episodes, actually, Mark, is that we can do it in real time as well. Russia UFO tungsten is that. Here we go. Ancientorigins.net, UP Online News. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is much more. Okay, I see. So let's take a look at ancientorigins.net. More than a dozen mysterious carved discs found near Volgograd, Russia. And here's the thing, and I quote, "A team of investigators in Russia have found more than a dozen discs in the Volgograd region of Russia. The team claims that the discs contain tungsten, a high-density metal that has applications in military technology. The nature of the discs remain a mystery." Now, again, it's very possible, it could have literally been a modern military experiment by the Russian government where they were trying to mess with tungsten, maybe using things like acoustic levitation or, ferromagnetic propulsion of some kind, or maybe this was some type of ancient structure of some kind. And again, what I find interesting, sorry for the little ramble here, but about tungsten is that at the subatomic and isotopic level, what seems to be quite prevalent within tungsten is the smoothness in which again, I'm not a physicist or anything like this, so I'm not pretending to be one, but to my understanding, the smoothness and the fluidity in which tungsten has within its own structure before it's even modified. And I say this because it's interesting that when you take a look, for example, at things like, let's see over here, This is aip.citation.org. This was submitted August 13th, 2021. The timing is also interesting relative to when the story in Russia broke there. But crystal structures and mechanical properties of tungsten monocarbide predicted by first principles investigations. So we see here, there's also a crystalline structure, which again uses fractals, fractality, and all that. But the point I'm trying to make is that I know I've mentioned him quite a lot recently, but if we look at Clifford Stone, for example, in the interview in 2006 with Project Camelot, he mentioned that I believe he was referring to what we now know to be the Black Knight satellite. He said it's in whatever species sent it, he didn't know, but he goes in their form of technology, that would be like us nowadays using a satellite from the 70s or 80s. It still works. So he said they send it every 30 to 40 years to orbit Earth as a way of monitoring. Now, allegedly, this Black Knight satellite has a strong amount of tungsten within it. And what's interesting too is that on the surface, it doesn't appear to be anything like we would imagine. There's no screen. There's nothing to indicate that it's, advanced. You would just think it's space debris or something like this. But if it's possible, relative to what we spoke about a couple episodes ago about like the skin of some of these craft, if the skin leading into the utmost core inner layers of the tungsten on the Black Knight satellite is some type of monitoring, energetic surveillance tool or system of some kind, it wouldn't surprise me. And I say this because look at the timing of these quote unquote studies that are suggesting. There's been a lot of suggesting these days. Last year traversable wormholes weren't a thing, and all of a sudden now it's suggested that traversable wormholes are. We see crystalline structures within that of the tungsten composition. I can't help but think that there's a strong connection here. Again, sorry for the ramble, but
no, not a ramble at all. No worries, man. I did see that tungsten is used for its incredible, durability, and it's the hardest material next to diamonds. So they use it to create titanium or to create carbides, which then they would probably put on a satellite to protect it from whatever space debris is floating around. But I don't know. I mean, what I'm really hung up on is the discs that you just showed there. Because for the listening audience, I mean, we're talking about huge UFO-shaped stone-looking discs made out of tungsten, and they're like 3-4 feet in diameter, and probably a ton looking. I mean, tungsten's as heavy as they say. It's probably multiple tons. And that guy standing next to it, I mean, he could barely reach both arms around it if he wanted to. So, I mean, those were massive discs. Whether the military built them or not, I mean, what comes to mind is like they're shooting them like frisbees out of a cannon or something. But like, I mean, like you said, possibly they're using some sort of magnetism to levitate those discs. That could be possible too. I mean, I spoke with Peter Shampoo, and he was talking about how the ley lines could have been activated to lift huge, massive amounts of stone. So again, it's like magnetic energy. Tungsten has these really strange properties that might be, they might coalesce with that, the need for that. But yeah.
Right. Well, actually, speaking of which, I appreciate you bringing that up, brother, because before Camden jumps in here, let's take a quick step back to those discs. I think you made a good point. We probably should have went over that a bit more, but we see here a large stone disc being, for those watching visually, being lifted by a crane in Volgograd in Russia. Let's see here. Earlier this year, and I quote, another disc-shaped stone object was discovered in Russia by a coal mining company, this time in Siberia's Kuznetsk basin. The strange relic was found 40 meters underground, which suggests quite old. Archaeologists who examined the stone disc, which is perfectly circular, with a diameter of 1.2 meters, stated that it was man-made. Now, interestingly enough, again, this would give you some context. We see here, dug up in Russia by a coal mining company, of the sizes and things like that. Now, again, this is very consistent with the traditional disc-shaped craft. No curvatures, very smooth. It's almost as if it's one unified, composition or material, if you want to call it. One thing I found interesting, however, though, is that as you were speaking, Mark, which you brought up, thanks to you actually, or else I never would have thought of it. Ionization, tungsten ionization energy. Now, I think if we remember the ionized air pockets, what you could do with that and what these beings allegedly do when they ionize the air and things like that. What's interesting, quick side note for the audience, is that the members will know this more than the public because it's up for our members now, but the interviews we've done with certain physicists and others that are very into that industry or realm of being able to decipher the raw data of UFOs, UAPs, half of them, to our knowledge at least, again, maybe this is just an anecdotal example, but half of them don't know what ionized air pockets could or would do. Then the other half say, no, that would make perfect sense as to why these beings might use ionized air pockets, and in some cases in direct parallel or correspondence with tungsten. Now we see here the tungsten.atomistry.com. The tungsten ionization energy is the energy required to remove from the atom 1 mole of electrons with subsequent production of positively charged ion of tungsten. This process can be repeated many times, but the energy cost is increased dramatically. The general equation for the tungsten is, again, I've no understanding of that whatsoever. Now, the one final thing here is that according to iopscience.iop.org, Journal of Physics, the Atomic, Molecular, and Optical Physics, disentangling, this was published August 9th, 2005, disentangling the emissions of highly ionized tungsten in the range of 4 to 14 nm, I would presume. I don't want to take a guess at that because I don't want to spread, misinfo or anything like that. But anyways, take a look at this right here. In this work, EBIT or EBIT measurements in the spectral range of 4 to 7 nm with electron energies from 0.7 keV to 4 keV. I'm going to be straight up, no idea what that is, but here's the thing, are compared in detail. The energy and temperature dependence of spectral lines and features are investigated, and an identification of the charge states W39 plus minus W45 plus for spectral lines between 4.5 nm and 6.5 nm is possible by taking cross sections from atomic data produced by plane wave Born calculations via the Cohen code. Now, okay, the reason why I bring this up is because if we take a look here a little bit further down, we see there's discussion about discharges pertaining to, again, a special tokamak discharge have provided ideal possibilities for analysis. These discharges show spectra which are dominated by the emissions from a small region with a narrow electron temperature range. Therefore, only very few ion states contribute to the emission, in contrast to the usual case where in the tokamak spectra, the emissions of a larger number of ion states are superimposed. End quote. Now, I bring all this up because we see here, and I quote, we conclude that the narrower features in the EBIT spectra at a certain electron beam energy result from the smaller number of coexisting ion states, end quote. These coexisting ion states within the ionized, as we see here, the disentangling the emissions of highly ionized tungsten seems to suggest, at least based on what we're seeing here, that it's possible there are different, I guess you could call fractal reserves or segments that these ionized tungsten, I don't want to say these ionized pockets within the composition of tungsten entail. It's almost like they're, I don't want to use the word self-conscious, but they're self-aware in a fractal sense. Within this, again, I don't know what NM means, but within the 4.5 to 6.5 NM range. I hope someone in the comments or publicly could... NM, like N Nathan, M Michael.
Okay, nanometers is my best guess. But
that's what I was going to say too before. I just didn't want to go out on a limb. But again, I hope that those in the comments or those listening could see what I'm getting at here in that regard. But yeah, sorry to hog it for so long, guys. But I found it interesting.
Yeah,
the ionization.
Nanometers is all it means, or nautical miles, but they're not talking about nautical miles.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I thought of that too, but I'm like no.
I mean, you bring up so many interesting points. The ionized forms of it is the same. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it is. That's isotopes, right? Of the element. That's what ionized elements are. The isotopes of said element, right?
If I'm not mistaken, yes, yeah.
Okay, so the isotopes of tungsten, and when I found they are slightly radioactive, yet they're decay rate is a quintillion years, give or take, only a couple thousand of each of the 5 kinds of isotopes. So they're practically stable. So those ionized versions, those ionized air pockets, you incorporate tungsten, it's hanging around. It's not going anywhere. Even if it was, talk about in these saucer frisbee things, it's stable, it's dense, it's solid material to use.
And I wonder as well if tungsten is a particular type of element that only, again, certain maybe factions or species use for their propulsion of the craft. And I say that because the Russian finding made me think, again, we have enough corroboratory evidence of whistleblower testimony to say, whether it's from private industry or military, that there are different propulsion systems. I wonder if tungsten plays a key role within a certain one relative to the bending of space and time.
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you, China owns 80% of the tungsten market in the world. 80%.
Really?
So in terms of not factions of other species, but factions of humanity, China's the faction as far as tungsten goes. So,
well, it's relatively new metal. I mean, just like what we talked about last time we did this with titanium. It's only been recently discovered and really utilized after 1783, I think was when it was discovered. And what's interesting is that there is this big push now to find sources of it in Canada, North America, and Europe, so that they can have a sort of balance to that stronghold monopoly that, China has on it. But either way, it even pre-World War II put a strain on the flow of diamonds, because the only thing, like I said, harder than tungsten is diamonds. So they need diamonds to cut these little tungsten wires that they then create into the filaments. But the Nazis ended up using these tungsten projectiles. And again, due to its conductibility, when it hits something, it's so charged with
melting it.
Yeah, it literally melts. And now the way they have, the weaponry, it will go inside the tank, and it's so hot that it literally cooks whatever is inside the tank. So it's, incredibly deadly weapon when applied in that way.
And I don't know, I'd never actually found, because I read about all the, beginning to use it, World War II and everything. We talked about, the rail type weapons, but is that a major piece of ammunition manufacturing today? Is that something that they're still using because of its hardness, its denseness? I don't know. I'm asking.
Mark, did you want to answer that, brother? Or
I mean, I don't know how relevant it is, but in 2015, someone said yes, because it's, I think you stepped away at this point, Camden, but uranium is toxic. So, it's it's radioactive. So tungsten is an alternative, but it's not, I don't think it's as easily procured as uranium is, which is why they were using that over.
Right.
Speaking of which, to add to that as well too, again, going back to aip.citation.org, a different branch of the report here, or the study rather, we see here, and I quote, tungsten monocarbide seems to be represented by the letters WC, with high hardness, high melting pressure, and wear resistance, is an important material used in the industry for high pressure studies. Tungsten monocarbide, I'm just going to say that instead of WC, is widely used as seats in diamond anvil cells in high pressure research studies. It displays PT-like behaviors in catalytic reactions and is a potential alternative electro catalyst. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know what that means, so I'm going to look that up real quick. Electro catalyst means an is a catalyst that, excuse me one second. Sorry about that. It is a catalyst that participates in electrochemical reactions. They're a specific form of catalyst that function at electrode surfaces, or most commonly, maybe the electrode surface itself. Again, similar to what I was saying earlier when Camden stepped out about giving that comparison to the smoothness and fluidity of what Clifford Stone mentioned about the Black Knight satellite and how, space rocks and things, debris or meteorites, things like this don't orbit in the way that does and don't give off electromagnetic frequencies and ionization surveillance the way that he claimed it did. Now, here's what's interesting as well, too. Moreover, tungsten monocarbide, with hard metals with superior mechanical properties and cutting performance are extensively used within industry. Now, it crystallizes in a hexagonal structure at ambient conditions with the space group P. I'm not going to pretend like I know what that is. So the point here is that we see the high pressure can modify the physical properties or induce structural phase transitions. Now, the question then becomes, right, what type of pressure could vary and alter and create something that could, again, bend space-time in different ways? So like if we see here, though the equation of state, EOS, stability, elasticity, hardness, and electronic structures of tungsten monocarbide are extensively reached, only little information is available about pressure-induced phase transitions explored. Now, see this, end quote. This is what I find interesting because, again, this is one of those things that it's like there's not much, research that's been delved into about pressure-induced phase transitions. Because when we think of that, in my opinion, pressure-induced, I think of piezoelectricity. I think of things. I'm not saying that fits into this directly, but again, the fact that there hasn't been much study on this or things like that, don't tell me the funding is not there, because if these institutions want to fund things, they'll get it done. So clearly, in my opinion, especially with such an open source website and frame of reference like aip.citation.org, I mean, come on. Like, we have it all right here in one shot. We got tungsten monocarbide crystallizes into a hexagonal structure. And then we scroll down a little bit more. But you know what? Not too much information is available about it when it's in a pressure-induced phase. Oh, how convenient. I'm not trying to create a conspiracy where there isn't one, but I can't help but think that when I see this,
absolutely.
Even publicly, I had to go check to make sure, but it is. Even publicly, it's in almost all our satellites. I think I heard y'all talking about that earlier, the satellites that it's in. It's in almost all of our space shuttles we were doing, hypersonic aircraft. It's the nose, like what breaks the atmosphere first, and you see that ball of fire coming off. If anyone remembers recently, China's whole hypersonic craft thing that they said broke laws of physics or whatever it did. That's their nose is comprised of mostly tungsten, so it is widely used even in public spacecraft and travel, much less what you were getting into earlier, Dave.
I did want to, sorry, Mark, did you want to jump in, brother? If not, I got something I just found.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So we see here, for those watching visually, I'm going to share my screen just once more. Phil Schneider, for those that are not familiar with him, very quick little briefing on him. He was allegedly to
be clear, I'm not having any screen share because I'm not recording that part of Zoom. So you just send me the links later and I'll put them on the screen, but...
Oh, got you. Nope. Okay, yeah. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. So we see here Phil Schneider, allegedly very famed individual. For a lot of people believe that he's dead. The pictures, photographs of him in the late 90s seem to show that. But the point is that he was one of the first, at least on the surface level of things, to come out and say, listen, I don't believe what's going on within these deep underground military bases is moral or ethical relative to the Constitution. He claimed to have been shot at within the Dulce or the Dulce base within New Mexico, you name it. However, this is he was one of the first to also come forward with some pictures from these deep underground military bases and talk about, the way they build them, how they build them, and all that kind of stuff. However, if we take a look here, and I did watch this speech, we see here, again, he's holding this particular piece of metallurgy, which it shows here is a titanium alloy from Roswell. However, there was another speech, and these are just some animated drawings in the back because this was apparently how he got hurt. But anyways, in one of the other speeches, he talks about how a particular metal, and he doesn't say what kind of metal, he says is put inside of every single military equipment or every single military aircraft, helicopters, fighter jets, you name it. And he said that very few people, except for those at the top, relative to the compartmentalization of it, only know what's going on within the craft. The fact that this metallurgy can immediately, in extreme emergencies, bend the craft, shut them down, literally disable it, bend space and time, and it's in, according to him, a lot of the now operational American weaponry and devices and equipment. If tungsten is so significant, could it be possible that tungsten has been implemented into some of these different equipments? Maybe not all of them, but some of them. Now, interestingly enough, he also, that same piece of metal, he said, if I'm not mistaken, was predated to something like a couple 100 million years old. So this is separate from the picture I just showed of him holding the titanium alloy from Roswell. But he said it was a couple 100 million years old. Now, to be fair, he also said, to play the other side of things, he goes, listen, you don't have to believe me. He goes, I'm telling you what I know to be true. He goes, it's just what I know to be true. And I respect that because, again, he's not saying this is factual the way it is. He's just saying this is what I know, what I've been told, what I've experienced. So, again, yeah, this is, again, he also was the one of the first ones to come out and say a lot of Secret Service agents died after the Dulce incident in the 70s, I believe, and what have you. But the point about the metal, though, is what strikes me to be the most interesting and peculiar. And if it's put inside of all these military craft and you know, their helicopters, their fighter jets,
yeah,
it really makes you think, like when you take a look, for example, at how, you know, military pilots like Commander Fravor have interactions with these UFOs and what have you. I can't help but think that's not all, but some of the inhabitants in these alien craft, know and can detect this potential, again, element or ionized tungsten within some of these equipment.
If you got something, Mark, go ahead. I didn't even mean to find this. I just found something really weird about it.
I love that you guys keep finding things. No, I was just gonna say, I mean, geez, it's used from everything from crosshairs to knives to bullet casings. So it's totally within the whole reach of military technology. I'm just curious, if 80% of it comes from China, how is the military using it in
such frequency? Right.
But they also, you know, it doesn't degrade theoretically as fast as most things. So it you know, those things that they made with.
Are they going to the, you know, not the bomb sites, but are they going and picking up bullet casings? Are they going, you know what I mean? Like, are they able to really recycle it? Because, yeah, sure then. Interesting. Just on straight market value, it's got, so this was November 3rd. We're in November, right? Yeah, okay. November 3rd. Midwest Tungsten Services in Willowbrook, Illinois, manufactured a 14-inch across cube, so 14, 14, 14, that because tungsten is, just like we've said, so heavy, so dense, the 14-inch cube, so like only a little more than a foot, weighs 2,000 pounds, literally a ton. And it's sold to a group of anonymous crypto investors for $250,000. And it is sold as an NFT, but the owners, I went to OpenSea, I'll put that on the screen too now. The owners can go to actual Midwest Tungsten in Illinois and see it in its own room, in its own private place. It includes on OpenSea unlockable content for the owner. There's no description of what unlockable content is by owning this, but you know what I mean? Like, not only do they own this only 14-inch cube that is valued at $250,000, but it comes with unlockable content. It's in its own room. It's like that's a really strange thing.
Content in what? Like what?
What? I'll show it on the screen, but I guess I can share my screen to y'all, even though they won't see it. But like, I don't know. I don't know.
Would it be possible that the crypto aspect is like, you know, adding to the value of crypto as an asset? Like our crypto is based in the value of this tungsten block that, you know, we're going to mint, you know, this many cryptos according to the weight of this tungsten block, right? Like, would that be?
So can y'all see that right now?
Yep.
So
Yep.
like literally that thing right there, unlockable content. We can't see what that means at all, but it's that is the cube held in Willowbrook, and this is the NFT that someone owns, Tungsten DAO, whoever that is, and it literally just sold this month. Like at what? That's a set market value now of a tungsten cube. Like, is this mineral holding? You know, like how many of those bullets we just talked about could you make out of this 1 ton cube? How like that's just weird, dude.
Right. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Sorry. Did any of you guys want to jump in on this? Because I did find something else
Yeah,
as well
keep
too.
going, do it.
Little separate, but from crypto. You guys can see my screen when I share it like this.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay. Let's take a look here. This is according to alien-ufo-sightings.com. Ancient nanostructures found in Ural Mountains are out of place and time. Now, again, a lot of people may be familiar with these, especially for those that are watching visually. You could see this. An UPART, out of place artifact, is a term, and I quote, applied to dozens of prehistoric objects found in various places around the world that, given their level of technology, are completely at odds with their determined age based on physical, chemical, and or geological evidence. UPARTs often are frustrating to conventional scientists and a delight to adventurous investigators and individuals interested in alternative scientific theories. Now, this is just some of the material found in 1991. The appearance of extremely tiny coil-shaped artifacts have been found near the banks of Russia's Kozym, Narada, and Balbanyu rivers, brought about a debate that has continued to this day. These mysterious and minuscule structures suggest that there may have been a culture capable of developing nanotechnology 300,000 years ago. Now, these manufactured coils were initially discovered during geological research associated with the extraction of gold in the Ural Mountains. Again, maybe we could connect that to the Anunnaki, but that's not even the point here. These pieces include coils, spirals, shafts, and other unidentified components. Now, here's what's interesting as well. Let's scroll down a little bit more. According to an analysis from the Russian Academy of Sciences in Syktyvkar, hopefully I said that right, the largest pieces found are mostly copper, while the smallest are made of tungsten and molybdenum.
That is a really dense mineral element to make something that, like the next thing says, smallest 1/10,000th of an inch. The small ones, if they're tungsten, that is a crazy manufacturing capability.
Right. That is huge. And not only that, but it, again, for at least to me personally, from what I get relative to the previous study that we were looking at, if they're saying there's very little research on tungsten and how it could be applied within that of, again, a sort of like a piezoelectric sense or application, I could see why there's been no public funding for it, because it would be able to produce things like this, given under the right, settings and things like that, which would then open the door to a lot of things. I think those at the top right now don't want to be open to, whether it's alternative history or whether it's, the ability to now apply this type of discovery to modern day apparatuses, right? Because we see here, and I quote, their shape suggest, well, first off, while the largest of these objects measures 1.18 inches, the smallest, keep in mind, the smaller ones are the ones with tungsten and the other element, are only one out of 10,000ths of an inch.
I mean, that I don't know that you can see that to the naked eye, but that is getting tiny. And when they say debates about nanotech, that's, I'd imagine this is size.
This is a magnified image of one of the nanocoils. So, in fact, they have been found to closely resemble the same miniature components of contemporary nanotechnology. Again, the fact that there hasn't been much studying into tungsten's ability
type stuff. Absolutely.
Right. In 1996, Dr. E.W. Matveyeva from the Central Scientific Research Department of Geology and Exploitation of Precious Metals in Moscow, wow, that's a long title, writes that despite being thousands of years old, the components are of a technological origin. Again, Mr. Schneider had mentioned things many millions of years old compared to this, but still, I mean, again, the fact that I find interesting, the smaller ones are made of tungsten.
Right.
The real small
larger ones were copper, which is, not a weak metal, but it's a versatile type thing. But the smaller ones being made of denser things, yeah, it goes, that manufacturing capacity is insane. That is all too modern and contemporary for something. What was it, 300,000 years ago? I think.
Yep.
God.
Yep.
And that's in the same area as the big discs too, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Let me see
At
here.
what point do coincidences stop being coincidences?
That's it. Well, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're on the 42nd or 44th parallel, which is which is like the human activity zone on the planet, right?
Right,
So,
yeah.
you know, even before whatever cataclysms were on the brink of the beginning of this civilization, people were most likely living in that same area throughout as long as humans have lived on this planet.
Yeah.
Determination of tungsten. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to.
Oh, it's all right.
Was just doing some more.
Say, you know, to your point about tungsten and its ability to crystallize, they use it in hard steel or fast, quick steel is what it's called.
Right.
They call that 'cause it's treated really quickly, like it finishes faster than the before.
And it just asking, it finishes fast because of tungsten's crystallization.
Right, they're creating a steel tungsten alloy, and you know, back to the whole World's Fair thing for people who are interested in that whole Tartaria thing. It was debuted at the World's Fair, so what that means, who knows? But I think it's definitely pivotal to the skyscrapers and that whole era of building, because you know all of that steel is most likely a carbide, you know, tungsten steel alloy.
Wow. Well, I just wanted to be completely open and transparent here. You might see in the in the Zoom chat, Mark, that we were going back and forth. We were just, I personally, I have to say, that's tungsten is so interesting that it's to the point where there's not even that much on it relative to modern science, because I think there's suppression behind it.
And we've run into that before on some of these elements where it seems like science has done a disservice by not investigating some of these things more, like how we're just sitting here, you know, interneting. We're not doing anything special, and why are we able to at least draw these conclusions and questions, and when it doesn't seem like anyone with any kind of grant has even tried to do something in the material? It's just
yeah, exactly.
Says a lot.
Oh, sorry, Mark, please.
Well, back to, you know, what we touched on with titanium, tungsten's another one of these elements that's in the human body. It's got organic components as well. So I think that's very interesting, considering, you know, the whole electric universe theory and this whole idea that we are light beings and there's energy. It's like, well, we have tungsten inside of us. Knowing all the things we just learned about tungsten, it kind of adds to what people say about auras possibly, and the ability to generate heat within your body. I mean, Wim Hof, you know what I'm saying? Like Wim Hof, he goes up to the top of Himalayas with you know, a bathing suit on, and he's able to survive just by doing these amazing breathing techniques that he now teaches to everybody. But you got to wonder, like, what on a chemical molecular level is happening in his body. Maybe a material or an element like tungsten, being that it is in our human body, and one of the first inventions of tungsten, like, was a tungsten salt that you would take as a medicine, because that's kind of why, and I learned about this when looking into like New England's history. That's kind of like why witches were thought of as like evil and whatnot. It wasn't so much that they were seen as devilish. Yes, that was true, and they were equated to Satan and all that stuff, but they were, you know, creating herbal medicines. And as people began to mine and understand minerals more and more, they valued mineral medicines or alchemical potions over these herbal potions that were older and more, you know, thought of as like rudimentary, when in reality, you know, a lot of these minerals are toxic and not the best for us. But I wonder, you know, if tungsten salts make a difference in that way. And like salt is a huge component in the body for conducting electricity as well. We know, you know, the electrolyte process, right? So it's just very, from the armchair biologist perspective, it brings a lot of questions up.
Totally.
And to sort of to add to that as well too, the fact that there's been such little research on again the nano aspect of it, and like you said, it's being used in all these different things, tungsten salt, you name it. Like, it really makes you think if there's been a deliberate, not even suppression, just a full on blatant halt. Like, okay, this is not being funded. There's no way. We see that with certain individuals like Jeremy Riss saying recently on our end of the show that, there's these sort of like dummy corporations that all lead up to like subsidiary companies that act as like a metaphorical garbage bin, that every time someone discovers something that's against the narrative, or maybe not discovers, but sort of just says, hey, to the world, I found this. If it's a, young kid that just graduated from university, he's got this, excitement in him, this charisma, and then all of a sudden, to his knowledge, a beautiful company comes along and says, hey, we want to buy it. But that quote unquote beautiful company is not so beautiful. It's a dummy company to cover for the suppression amongst academia globally, right? So I got to be honest with you guys. This is all so far. This has inspired me to do even more research in my spare time. But this is all that I have on tungsten so far.
Yeah, that's
no.
I mean, not that this is all. We've all covered quite a bit.
I think this is one of the elements that we'll run into where, there's not that much to be said about it. Like, we pointed out, it was only discovered in 1783. And to your point, I think when you see an element like this overwhelmingly used in military technology, that may indicate that they're funneling it away from other applications that could be beneficial and not within this whole military industrial complex. But yeah, I think the part about it being in our bodies, I don't know.
My question to you would only be, is it naturally occurring in our bodies versus has it been, not socially construct, but like, have there been so many things we've like eaten for so long that it's just now it is in our body? Now it is, you know what I mean? Or is that, do we know if that's naturally occurring like iron would be?
It's actually more part of our microbiome. So I maybe you should have clarified. It's not as much a part of
like that gut bacteria type stuff and like, right. Okay, yeah.
It's a part of certain types of archaea and eukaryotes and different little organisms, single cell organisms that are in our bodies. But on the other side of it, the guy who named wolframite, the ore that we get tungsten from, he was the founder of agricultural chemistry, which, as we know now, is very much tied into the whole military industrial complex too. Monsanto, pesticide, all of this stuff. So it does kind of come full circle, but I'm totally cool with putting a pin in this one, stacking it up with the others on the table of elements, and moving on to the next element, whatever synchronistically comes up.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. A great way to wrap it up too, Mark. I think that was a phenomenal way to wrap it, because again, like you said, that we see the Monsanto military industrial complex that, we just gave the example of 10-20 minutes ago, Phil Schneider saying, this type of metals in most or all of the very high-end military equipment, at least to what we know of on the surface of things. You see tungsten being used within military experiments all the time. So again, with what was found in Russia, whether it was the discs or the nanospirals within relatively the same geographical vicinity, there's a lot. The hexagonal crystalline structures tungsten makes at the atomic level, like it's very, very interesting. But with that being said, everybody, thank you so very much once again for a great episode. We'll be back in a week or two with the next element with our great friend Mark. And Mark, brother, before we go, could you please tell everybody where and how they can find you?
Yeah, if you're listening to this on the Generation Z podcast, go and follow me as well at the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. I post this episode there as well, so my listeners can get a taste of the Generation Z show. And I do a bunch of other shows that you can find there as well. But go to myfamilythinksimcrazy.com to get it all in one place.
Thank you so much, and we'll catch everybody next time.